The standard of living is absolutely collapsing in Canada, but the thing is, this is a self-induced, self-inflicted problem that has happened. And if you look at this chart from the National Bank, you can see that the population has absolutely exploded in Canada. Right now, meanwhile, we are going through a productivity emergency, as the Bank of Canada is calling it. And you have all these problems swirling in the economy, like we just got a GDP report, and they just cannot hide the numbers anymore. You can see from this tweet that I put out here that it was in fact driven by public sector growth. The thing is, about the only thing that has grown and recovered since the pandemic in Canada has been the government, has been the public sector. And you can see that it's been a thing of public sector growth that has driven a lot of the inflation that we've seen. Now, there have been multiple things that have affected inflation, from the supply chain disruptions to just the changing habits with what happened during the pandemic, people buying everything online, then driving straight towards services when there was a reopening. There was many things, but also the fact that the public sector has grown so much and the public sector takes away from productivity instead of adding to it means that inflation is obviously going to go higher. I mean, it's just obvious, isn't it? The government puts in place red tape and regulation that doesn't help growth. It actually stifles growth. Of course, most of the time, the oligarchs and politicians want you to believe that this pro-Canadian red tape is to protect Canadian workers and protect Canadian jobs. But in actual fact, when you really look into the detail, it is just designed to protect the oligarchy that is in place and the monopolies that are in place in nearly every industry across Canada, whether it's grocery stores, banking, or airlines. The monopoly in everything isn't just a coincidence, and it's no coincidence that no political party wants to address this either. The thing is, the politicians of the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Liberals want you to think that they are far away from each other and that there are a broad spectrum of different parties with different policies, when actual fact, when you look at where they are very close together. Many people right now, because of the current government of Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, and their just failure and tyranny and authoritarianism and censorship, are obviously clinging to politicians that they are idolizing, thinking that they are going to be the solution to the problem. And the problem is that's never the case, and that just never happens. I mean, look at Alberta, for instance, because Alberta had a premier, we all know, Danielle Smith, and I had high expectations and high hopes, thinking that this was maybe the first libertarian premier to come in Canada. However, she's done nothing but fail, in my opinion, with massive amounts of stimulus programs, with inviting everybody to come to Alberta and pushing the cost of living up astronomical amounts. I mean, when you really look back on Alberta over the past 5 to 7 years, whether you've been under the NDP or the Conservatives, if you actually look back, life was better under the NDP. It was certainly a lot more affordable. But the thing is, I'm not illustrating that to say that the NDP is a better party. I'm illustrating this to show you that the economy is in fact bigger than these politicians. You see, the politicians want you to believe that they control everything. And unfortunately, we live in a world where the politicians are literally always the ones that have to come up with the solution. And this has kind of brought us to a problem, because we don't solve problems in society ourselves. We push a lot onto the government's plate. And the fact is, the government is just getting bigger and bigger to deal with that. And they are the most inefficient institution and engine to deal with these problems that we have in society. Canada is far from a free market capitalist country, and neither is the United States. You're living a lie if you think that. The United States is definitely one of the closest nations in the world to being a free market capitalist country. Here in Canada, we are far from that. Red tape and regulation stifles growth and makes life harder in Canada, and actually drives away business investment from even coming to Canada. You see, the Bank of Canada recently said that Canada needs more business investment. So how do you drive more business investment? Well, it's certainly not government expansion, more red tape and regulation. The problem is, I think that too many people now, when anything goes wrong in their life, immediately blame the government. And the problem with doing this constantly is that means the government has to be the answer to all your problems. They have to try and solve all your problems. And this brings to the front populist politicians that come forward and they basically just whim around with whatever view that is currently trending, trying to fit into everybody's narrative of a great politician, which is just never going to work. One thing that is constantly overlooked as well and is just blatantly obvious is that if you import a lot of people from third world countries, you are going to become a third world country. And
surrounding them are all these abandoned houses, shuttered and bordered. This is a dying town of the northeast.
And this is something that I've seen happen in my home country, the UK, that has just turned into a complete dystopian nightmare over the past 10, 15 years post-GFC. And I've seen the country crumble. I've seen infrastructure that is actually in better shape in third world countries than I have in my home country, the UK. And this is the path that Canada is going to go down over the next 10, 15 years as well. It's already been said that Canada is heading into a lost decade. And I think that that is very true. Right now, we're not in a technical recession, as the government would tell you. But as we've discussed on this channel many of times, if you just take out the public sector from the growth figures, from the job figures, then we are in a very bad recession right now. And even regardless of recession, depression, just look at the standard of living collapse. Just look at the lineups at different job fairs around the country. Just look at the homelessness problem. We are living in a literal depression right now. We are living in a mental health crisis right now and a health crisis where people are being incentivized not to be healthy anymore because it benefits big corporate interests like the pharmaceutical industry. And we have many interests and a lack of critical thinking. People just don't think things through anymore. They rely on flippant things that they see on their phone and on Instagram and on TikTok instead of actually thinking things all the way through, instead of just taking headlines at face value. When you dig into the data, it's just unfortunately very bleak for Canada, and it doesn't look like it's looking up anytime soon. It looks like there are major problems in the economy, and I don't think any politician is going to be able to turn around this. Like I said, I believe this is much larger than any politician. And as we've seen from Danielle Smith as an example, the response is going to be very similar if we enter times of problems. It's going to be stimulus and it's going to be driving population growth. And all that will be at the expense of the cost of living of the average person. The middle class is shrinking, and I've never seen a middle class shrink as fast as in Canada. The people coming here are quickly realizing how bad it is here and are leaving. In fact, over 30% in recent polls have said that they want to leave. People who've arrived over the past 3 years, they're quickly seeing what it's like here. So with everything going on, how do we move forward? And how do we actually get around this? How do we actually become a better country? Well, a lot of these problems, like I said, are self-inflicted. So here's the thing. I don't believe things are going to change, unfortunately. I believe that it's time to boycott. I believe that it's time to stand up and push back against these policies, not idolize politicians when they bring through similar authoritarian policies that you agree with. Then you need to push back against that as well. We seem to be drifting between authoritarian left and authoritarian right, and it's a really dangerous path to go down. And we seem to have elements from Argentina and elements from the collapse of Japan as well. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I would highly recommend that you check out this video here. If you're looking for a VPN to get around all the censorship laws in Canada, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. I will see you in the next one. Take care.